Hello, you're listening to Market Matters, our market series on JP Morgan's Making Sense podcast. I'm Claudia Jury, Global Co-Head of Sales and Research at JP Morgan, and today I'll be speaking with Robyn Grew, CEO of Man Group. Man Group is an active investment management company running over a $175 billion in AUM. Robyn, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So in September 2023, you became CEO. The natural place to start is, how did you get here?
So how did I get here? I was and have been part of Man Group for nigh on 15 years. And that's a decent amount of time to spend in any organization. Maybe I go a little bit further back though. By training, I'm a barrister, so I should find this talking out loud easy. I don't. Then I found myself in financial services with an aim actually to go back to the commercial bar. I started off in the common law bar and found this world a little bit too exciting to give up. So via investment banking, and by that I mean Lehman Brothers and Barclays Capital, I found myself on the buy side at a hedge fund called GLG in Europe, which was bought by Man Group. So fast forward 14, 15 years, that's how I find myself sitting in this seat today. But obviously a route via being a lawyer, being a reg person, being somebody who ran chunks of Man Group, technology or responsible investing or the execution and trading team via being the COO and then the president before this job, the CEO. And that's how I find myself here today.
Great. So today we're going to talk a lot about the alternatives landscape. And so if we think about it, the alternatives growth has been very meaningful. When you think about where the AUM is today at roughly about 30 trillion over the last 20 years. And then if you think about the hedge fund industry that accounts for roughly about 4 trillion, I mean, that's been massive growth. From where we sit, we see increasing complexity. And we see complexity with our clients. No doubt you are also seeing complexity with what your clients are asking for. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how complexity is impacting your business, maybe how the changes have come around for portfolio construction, how it plays itself out on your side.
I think, listen, we're at a moment in time where the last 10 or so years have been quite benign in nature. So as we all know, if you were an asset holder within that period, whatever type of asset, I mean, you might be risk adjusted, but nevertheless, you're an asset holder, you would have made money. You could rely on beta, cash was free, you could put money to work in privates, and through that time, we've seen an extraordinary investment and actually a decrease in the number of publicly listed companies. You're seeing large numbers, swathes of assets now, companies that are earning, 100 million or more in revenue. Some north of 80% of those are now in private space. They're not in the public domain. So during that time, cash was free. You could make money on beta. You put money to work in privates. And in the last 18 months or so, you've seen a significant change in that. Inflation got out of the bag, and we all know it's extraordinarily difficult to put inflation back in the bag. It takes all sorts of responses from fiscal and monetary policy and intervention, and that normally is painful. And so with that, with inflation becomes interest rates, a new thing, not if you're my age, but a new thing necessarily within that 10 or so year period. With that comes volatility, with that comes dispersion. And so we have a market environment that in and of itself is doing things that it hasn't done for a while, perhaps reverting back to the way markets used to operate. You're seeing some quite large geopolitical issues. You know, you've got two wars, one right on the doorstep in Europe with Russia and Ukraine, one that I think is extraordinarily painful and very live in the Middle East. You have some real themes in climate and change in the market space because of that. You have massive developments in technology. It's very hard to have a conversation with anybody without talking about AI and tech at the moment. And so we find ourselves in a place where indeed it's complex. The market is difficult. The market environment is difficult. And clients are finding themselves with a portfolio construction that was probably lent into that beta free cash space. And now they're looking and saying, hang on a second, how do we put money to work? How do we rebalance portfolios? How do we think about trying to make money through these different market cycles in a way that we haven't had to or needed to date? So as a buy-side active investment manager, our job is to be part of the solution for those clients. What does it mean? It means that you want to have diverse content. You want to be able to partner with clients as they think about rebalancing and structuring their portfolios. It means that you should have the capability, and we've built capability, to provide answers to the challenges that each client is facing rather than just having a list of products that people can invest in. Of course they can, but actually being more sophisticated than that, I think, is important. And perhaps that's, as we see it, 2/3 of our AUM now is in some form of customization. So it's a really interesting question because it's about the complexity of clients facing different markets with portfolios that they've constructed for different market environment in a world which is highly unpredictable, where we're seeing volatility through any number of different reasons, and where actually diversity of content capability is going to be ever so important in helping clients navigate through that time.
So you've been referred to as the largest listed hedge fund.
We have.
But I see it way more than that.
That's right.
So can you talk a little bit about how do you differentiate yourself? And by the way, no doubt, Robyn, a lot of your peer group are also doing some of the same things that you've just talked about. Customization. We certainly hear this word. So what's the differentiator for you versus some of your peers?
I think it comes by way of credibility and investment in your operating platform to actually deliver content. So when I think about Man Group, yes, we've been known as the largest listed hedge fund. And I would say we are much more than a hedge fund. We have much more content that comes in long only, but in long short format. We have 35 years of heritage in quant investing and systematic capabilities, both in the macro space, but also in the equity space. We have a full suite discretionary offering, and that runs all the way from the long only, that liquid end of equities, all the way into a private credit business. And we actually have a dedicated division, which is there about putting content together in solutions. And part of that heritage also is in understanding and being an allocator in a fund of fund space. So when you put that together, and then when you recognize that over the last 5 years or so, we've put about $600 million of investment into technology. You can't be diverse. You can't have distinct content. You can't put that content together. You can't be responsive to clients, and you can't find alpha unless you have built an infrastructure and an operating platform that can deliver that can deliver risk-adjusted alpha return in a scalable format. So I think if you're a cold start on some of those elements, that's hard yards. I think the other piece is we have focused very much on having different content. When people ask me, what keeps you awake at night? Actually, it should be the other way around. What allows me to sleep at night? Because I just am not very good at that sleepy thing. But what I care about most of all is that we continue to do that hard thing, which is find alpha in different places. You think about the heritage of a quantitative momentum strategy, and I think about where we started. You probably had access to 30 markets? We're at 800 plus markets where we get access. When you think about what we trade, it's a market print of something like $7 trillion. That's about 21 million trades. You need scale and capability to do that because you are always on the hunt for new alpha, new sources, new abilities to return that extra to clients. And by the way, to do that, you need to invest in the bit that people don't see, the bit under the bonnet, the engine room, the operating platform, your execution capability, because it's very easy to erode that alpha. So what makes us different? I think it's the diversity of content. I think it's the investment in technology. And it's not just the quant technology that you might automatically think about. It's the entire operating platform of the organization. That's, I think, what makes us different.
So I actually really want to come back on this point about the operating platform, technology. I think so much of that used to be at arm's length to a lot of portfolio managers. It was the beta to all of the alpha that you just talked about. But it's become so much more relevant now to everybody.
Sure.
But I actually want to spend a couple minutes. But before we get there,
okay,
because you touched on a wide range of different strategies that are available. And when I look at the alternatives industry, very clearly, there's been a meaningful acquisition strategy that's been happening out on the street, whereby you see traditional asset managers acquiring alternative shops. You see some of the larger alternatives buying smaller. So when I think of your firm, 200 plus years.
Yeah, 240 years, but also made up of acquisitions too.
So it was JP Morgan, by the way. So can you talk a little bit about what your current growth strategy is? And you mentioned private assets.
Yep.
So how are you thinking about private assets, and how reactive are you to the preferences of your clients who may be looking to get into that space?
Again, great question. A number of different ways of thinking about those things. One, we are an organization that has been extraordinarily good at acquisitions. And I think there's a discipline to that. I think acquisitions are not something that you can just shove organizations together and hope it works. I think it requires a plan. We don't do acquisitions, for example, to just have synergistic cost savings. We look at acquisitions as content additive to the organization, both in the vertical, can it stand on its own, but also can we deliver it as part of solutions? We have a very disciplined look at, is this an opportunity which we can scale? Is it an opportunity that culturally fits within the organization? Is it an opportunity that is attractive and interesting to clients? And so your question about how much are we responsive to clients, we believe that our role is to partner our clients, that our clients make us better at what we do. When you have great clients, when you have clients who are engaged with you, when they create content with you, one, we get smarter because of that. But two, it enables us to position the firm to be relevant to those clients as they are moving forward through their own needs and requirements. So I think if you stand away from your clients, if somehow that goes on as an exercise away from clients, I don't know how you make that work. For us, clients are critical to our thought process. And I absolutely think about what our capability is and whether our clients need that capability. When I think about what's going on in the market, there is also no doubt in my mind that allocators across the world want to face fewer managers and GPs. I mean, they just do. They want to have deeper relationships with people who can offer them greater content over more of their book, in effect, and all of their categories. So does it surprise me there's consolidation? No. Do I think it's a part of a direction of travel? Absolutely. Equally, we've been talking about consolidation since the GFC. So this, it hasn't happened. But for sure, I'm seeing a direction of travel. And for sure, I understand why allocators want to face organizations that also can think about the content that they're investing in and be able to give them reporting and understanding about the correlation of those risks, about how those books operate together, about maturity, about the duration of those books, and can be part and parcel of how they think about rebalancing their portfolios. It's very hard to do that if you're facing off against hundreds of managers.
Certainly, I can't get out of a conversation where it doesn't touch on data and all things to do with QIS, for example. You talked about GLG, discretionary, and then you talk about some of the heritage businesses. To me, quant is a big part of how I think about Man Group.
Yep, and it should be.
So how do you see the whole sort of DNA of quant in the firm and the sort of future of quant?
I think that I say it out loud, and it's a peculiar thing in some ways to say, but I say that technology is part of the DNA of Man Group. So we have maybe, let's say, a third to a half of our workforce is somehow quant, tech, developer, data science based. It's impossible to be part of a conversation at Man without tech being seen as an enabler and an efficiency, an effective part of how we deliver Man Group to our clients. We talk about quantamental investing. We talk about how do we give access to the discretionary teams so that they have NLP capabilities, so they're able to do what they do with higher conviction because we can give them data that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to get a hold of quickly, efficiently, effectively. And whether that's things like sentiment analysis or aggregation or being able to search vast amounts of research reports for particular phrases. That's something we can do at a drop of a hat. Equally, at the other end of that, we're talking about how we can use AI to take nonlinear signals and combine them, something that's really difficult to do. So we use technology everywhere in the organization. I have coders in legal. When I talk about the capability of the organization and that scale thing that we were touching on earlier, we have doubled our AUM since 2016 and not increased operational headcount. That's tech. That's about the fact that in parts of the year, actually my ops team are the biggest users of Python than anywhere else in the firm. So don't even just think about technology and skills, data science skills as part of the engines, the alpha generation. It's at every part. When I think of execution, we're using our own models to execute because they're designed specifically to enable better execution, faster, smarter, and by the way, closer with less tracking error against our strategies. So every part of the organization is designed to deliver alpha back into clients. It's not our money. It's our clients' money. We come into work every day to deliver returns to real people's savings and pensions. That's what we do. We never lose focus on that. So the entire organization is built to do that. I don't know how you do it without incredibly strong tech capability. And that's why when you talk to us about quant, super happy. But we're also really happy to talk to you about how we put tech to work everywhere in the firm.
And that goes back to that point about the operating model.
Correct.
Right? And how critical it's become to
right.
get that piece right in order, because alpha is really hard to generate.
So hard.
So you've got to get it in the beta.
It's hard to generate and it's hard to find new sources of it. Again, that's your tech, the ability to go out and find new data sources and be able to understand whether you in fact can replicate that at scale, whether you can test it smarter. But if you want more access to more data, again, technology gives you the ability to take data sources that are now in multiple languages and test them really quickly, really capably. So when we think about AI and when we think about generative AI, do I see that making investment decisions anytime soon? No. But in the hands of skilled technologists, quants, developers, data scientists, it can make us better, faster, smarter. And that is its real power in this. The other benefit, of course, of having half a firm made up of these extraordinarily capable individuals is they appreciate both the quality and the capability of those tools, but they never forget the downsides, the risks of those tools. And that's incredibly important too, right? We don't want to be in a position where you are sending stuff into a black box and you don't know what's coming out the other side of it. You're never going to find that at Man Group. But that's because I've got a firm dedicated to being and using these tools as precision tools, not as sort of an answer, somehow a silver bullet.
You mentioned generative AI.
Yeah.
Is it going to become the true trading lead? Maybe not soon, but
I think the danger is to think of AI as somehow a new thing. Listen, we've been using AI for the bid offer in the firm is 10 to 15 years. Easily. Generative AI is the next version of it. And certainly there's been an enormous hype. There's clearly huge uptick in an understanding and a realization of where this tool can be used. There'll be a next generation and a next generation after that. So is technology going to be part of what we do? Yes. Is it going to be transformational? I think it could be to certain industries and certain spaces. Will it make us smarter and better at what we do in investment management, in the sell side and the buy side? Should do. But will it still require skilled experts to deploy it? Yes, for some time to come, I think. And that's why I think there's a sense of a dampening of some enthusiasm in the space, but we're still excited about its capabilities. But again, back into skilled hands. I was saying to somebody the other day, there's been enormous developments with surgical tools, for example, neuroscientists being given very, very clever tools which reduce the margins of error, literally reduce the margins. And you get better screens and better capabilities, the fineries of these tools. You still wouldn't want to give them to me. Right, it would probably be a bad outcome if you gave me those tools. I'm just suggesting, with no training at all. You want them in the hands of skilled operatives. It's the same with this technology. You want it in the hands of skilled operatives.
So can you give an example of a use case that you are excited about?
We're excited about a bunch of things.
Maybe not surgical tools?
Maybe not the surgical tools, but okay, fine. So let's think. Sentiment analysis is an obvious one. As you take both written and verbal, what we're doing today, you can pass that through now to see sentiment analysis. You can use some of the modeling we're doing as a predictive tool, not a singularly predictive tool, but a predictive tool in ESG incidents or in financial planning and forecasting. You can see it, as I said, in non-linear signals being combined. You can see it in large language models and deploying the capability of taking vast amounts of data now and in seconds, not days, being able to transfer that into something that's more meaningful. So there are many different use cases here. And one of the use cases I said earlier, we use our own models and our own machine learning in our own execution. So at every part, you are finding ways to aggregate, check, create, test, find data, use it smarter, bring it to the organization in a way that is about returning and preserving value.
So the people that deploy it ultimately are your greatest asset, which is your talent.
Yep.
So if we think about your annual report, you mentioned talent,
tech
and talent, or
yes.
talent and tech.
Either way.
But for you, I see that as really synonymous. Clearly passionate about the technology space and the people. Can you talk a little bit about the culture at the firm? And again, how that whole culture plays a role at Man Group?
For sure. People say this, and this is not my phrase, but your assets go up and down in the lift every day or in the elevator if I'm being bilingual for the audience. And that's true. The culture of an organization, I think, is paramount. It's something you have to think about every single day. What you want to do and what we want to do is want to hire the smartest and the best. And then we want to give them the tools that they need to be even better in their jobs. That's what you want to do. You want to inspire people, create an environment which allows them to shine. You want entrepreneurs, you want creatives, you want people who are willing to speak up, to be part of making the firm better. They need to feel the value that they bring every single day, and we join that value up with clients. It is important to the people at Man that we come to do a single job. We come into work to return value to real people. We face the biggest allocators in the world, across the world. We never lose sight of the fact that they're entrusting us with the savings and the pensions of very real people. Matters to us that we do that. And so when you have a culture that's very, very focused on doing that thing and doing it really well, you then want to bring the broadest, smartest group of people together into the room, and you want to give them a toolkit to deliver that. And if you are talking about developers, these developers want to be in a space where they get access to the newest and the best technology. They want to be out there in an open source way, sharing ideas, which is why you'll find our marks on GitHub are the highest for any asset manager. And that's your Travelocity marks out of 10, whatever, for the quality of the content that we share in that open sourced environment. That's probably double the marks that very esteemed investment banks get, right? It's demonstrative of how we think about accessing and providing people with a toolkit. But it's beyond that. The quality of people in the firm and the collaboration that you need in a firm to be the best you can do is what I work on every single day. So incredibly important that you get your culture right. Incredibly difficult, but you've just got to put everything you have into making your people feel great and that they're getting everything they need to be the best they can be.
But the talent acquisition, the environment is really, really hard right now.
Yeah, it is hard. But, you say that. And I think about, again, let me talk about technology because it's an easy one. People often ask me, you're not just competing against other buy-side players or investment banks, you're competing against this thing called FANG with two N's. And that's true. What's really interesting about it is when we've lost people 5-6 years ago into FANG, they want to come back again, we found, because the area that they get to focus on is much more defined. It's ring-fenced. They're not literally stuck in a cubicle because they have skateboards and other whizzy things. But, they're stuck in a very narrow format of what they can and can't influence. When they come into Man Group, they are being challenged with real world issues. They're being given a platform where they can be broad and wide, where they get to collaborate, where they get to be part of solving some of the hardest things. And those things keep on happening. It's not like a one and done thing. Yet we are constantly moving, constantly part of the relevance of how markets are operating and what real people need by way of an investment manager to be partnering them to navigate those spaces. We are not short of having high quality applicants coming to us. And again, I think that's because the value proposition, it's more than what's the dollar number you pay them. It's the culture, it's the freedom, and it's the real world impact you can have being part of a buy-side organization that's there operating across the globe.
Well, I think that's a perfect place for us to wrap up. But before we do, can we do a couple of fun rapid fire questions? So, what was the best investment advice you've ever received?
So, best investment advice I ever received was invest in yourself. First and foremost, we I know that's not what you meant, but let's go with it, right? Invest in yourself. There's something really important about being proud of who you are and being the best version of you in whatever you do, whatever field you're in. And investing in yourself gets forgotten as we talk about these things. Be the best you can be. Come to work and be the best you can be. Surround yourself with people who make you better every single day. That's what I do.
I actually like that.
Yeah, you like that answer?
I think that that's a great answer. And I like the fact that we have to sometimes remind ourselves, and education doesn't end.
It certainly doesn't. I was at a dinner the other night and with somebody who was reasonably well known in the world, and they're 80-something years old. And I sat down with them and they said to me, the thing that's really important. And I said, tell me. And they said, surround yourself with young people, never stop learning, and don't be frightened of getting stuff wrong. Great advice. Great advice.
Words to live by.
Words to live by.
So, what's your favorite podcast? And it doesn't have to be this one.
Okay. Well, other than this one. So, two podcasts that I love. One, Uncharted by Hannah Fry, who can make maths really fun. And I've been lucky enough to meet her, and she's a powerhouse. And so give it a shot. The other one that I think is good is Wiser Than Me by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Again, she just interviews people, these women who are...
Is there humor?
It's Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Of course there's humor. There's humor and there's humanity. And I think we all could do with a bit of that. So if you're on a long plane journey or a train journey, put those two on. They're good combinations.
I will absolutely do it. And then maybe if we can wrap it up with one last one. Tell us one thing about yourself that people may not know.
Good grief. I'm probably the most open book you can get. What would people not know? They probably wouldn't know that I this is self-diagnosed. So they probably wouldn't know that I'm an ambivert. In other words, I present as quite an extrovert, but I have this introvert piece of me too. And so I kind of sit in the middle of those two things. And that might not be the most apparent thing.
But your passion is infectious, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
That's a very kind thing to say.
And leaders need to have passion. So
I believe in that.
Terrific. Anyway, Robyn, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Market Matters. If you've enjoyed this conversation, we hope you'll review, rate, and subscribe to JP Morgan's Making Sense to stay on top of the latest industry news and trends. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. The views expressed in this podcast may not necessarily reflect the views of JP Morgan Chase & Co. and its affiliates, together JP Morgan. They are not the product of JP Morgan's research department and do not constitute a recommendation, advice, or an offer or a solicitation to buy or sell any security or financial instrument. This podcast is intended for institutional and professional investors only and is not intended for retail investor use. It is provided for information purposes only. Referenced products and services in this podcast may not be suitable for you and may not be available in all jurisdictions. JP Morgan may make markets and trade as principal in securities and other asset classes and financial products that may have been discussed. For additional disclaimers and regulatory disclosures, please visit www.jpmorgan.com/disclosures/sales and trading disclaimer. For the avoidance of doubt, opinions expressed by any external speakers are the personal views of those speakers and do not represent the views of JP Morgan.